Genesis chapter 10. Let's turn there. We just got through them building the Tower of Babel, 300 feet high. And, our soldiers, when they went to Iraq, they found portions of Babylon, because it's in Iraq, what is now Iraq. And they've actually found portions of what they believe was the foundation for the Tower of Babel. We know it's true. I mean, obviously it's in the Bible, and of course we believe the Bible. And the Bible proves itself out all the time. That's what's funny about like the Book of Mormon and things like that. The Book of Mormon talks about the Americas before Christ and all that. They talk about being iron and things like that here, when iron hadn't even been developed yet. So I mean, a lot of stuff doesn't add up. But the Bible has been proven true over and over and over. Genesis chapter 10, verse 8, and I'm reading the English Standard Version, says Cush, who was the son of Ham, says, fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. That's Nimrod. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went into Assyria, which was north of that, and built Nineveh, Rebohath-ir, Calah, and Rezin, between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. You guys all heard of Nineveh, right? The evil city. Jonah was told to go there. What did Jonah do? He went down on a different boat, went the complete opposite direction.
That was a long time.
After, quite a bit after. But it was evil people. Matter of fact, they talked about how they liked to skin people alive there. And they killed their young, killed their old. Just a bad place. But I think it all got its start by being founded by Nimrod. He was a pretty evil guy. When it says, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, in verse 9, Nimrod was the proverbial hunter. Like people say, oh man, you're a hunter like Nimrod. And one night, Barb and I, when we lived in our other place where we bought our house, there was a cricket outside our window one night. It was so loud. Man, that thing was just, it's amazing, rub their legs how loud they can be. So I went out and I caught it, and I told her I was the great hunter. The great lion hunter. So I was a hunter like Nimrod. Hi guys. Yeah, you doing it? No, I just got to squash it. I just squashed it.
Watch it like a bug.
The bug that he was. Anyway, it says, we're in Genesis chapter 10. But anytime you read, what's that?
Old Testament.
Old Testament. Yeah, Genesis and the Old Testament. But Nimrod, anytime you read anything about him, talks about him being a hunter, but he was a hunter of men also, not just animals. There was an old movie years ago, and I don't remember the name of it, but they took these, like one guy from a major country, like Russia, like one guy from the U.S., and they put them on an island, and whoever killed the other one, their country won. And so, they had to hunt men, and they had to hunt each other. Well, that's what Nimrod did. He hunted people. I mean, can you imagine how evil that would be? You catch somebody and say, okay, run, I'm going to start doing it. They had a show actually a while back on an outdoor channel where a guy was a tracker up in Canada, and people would sign up for the show, I guess. And they would run from him, and he would track them down, and they had to get to a certain point, like maybe 20 miles away. And every once in a while, people got away from him, but he was good. Well, he would track them down. He could tell by looking in the dirt where they had been, how long ago they had been. So I imagine that's probably what Nimrod did. Nimrod established several cities and built several cities. Babylon was one of them. They didn't finish it, we see in the Bible. They did finish the Tower of Babel, but they didn't finish the city of Babel. He founded these other cities, Nineveh and all these others we talked about a while ago. Nimrod, the very word, means to rebel. And I wonder sometimes, how do these people know when they, you see so many times in the Bible that they name their kids, and their name ends up being what their whole life's about. How do they know sometimes? And I don't know if God gave them revelation, which he could have, but like the Comanche Indians, they would name their child when it was born, but then their life events would mold them, and they might actually get 2 or 3 different names through their life because of something they've done. Fauna Parker, who was a big figure in the Texas Panhandle, West Texas, his mother had actually been kidnapped. She was a white woman, and she was kidnapped when she was about 9 years old by the Indians. They took her, and the chief married her later and had this child, Quanah. So he was half Indian, half white. But Quanah, the name Quanah, I remember hearing it in our history lessons when I was in maybe 8th grade. Quanah means stink. And I thought, wouldn't that be something to have a name, stink, all your life?
Guana.
What's that?
You said guana?
Quanah, Q-U-A-N-A-H.
What about guana?
Guana, yeah.
That's
Guana.
stinky too.
Guana
That's
is
bad.
That's
something didn't smell right when he was named, apparently. Anyway, but I wonder sometimes, and you don't see it in the Bible, but I wonder sometimes if maybe that would be how they got their name. Maybe their name was something else, but they called them that. I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us that, but something had to happen for them to know how to name their child according to what their life would be. And we don't really know. But Nimrod meant to rebel. So you know right off the bat, this guy's not going to be good, right? And everything you'll read about him, you can look at Wikipedia, you can look, any books, anything you read about Nimrod, he was a bad guy. Okay? His name, it says, it points to some violent and open rebellion against God. He actually was very rebellious toward God. He began to...
Mom and Dad, oh, what a sweet little boy. Let's name him Nimrod.
Yeah,
So cute.
rebel. So you got to wonder, why did they, you know? But it talks about his rebellion is associated with the beginning of his kingdom. It suggests that his hunting and mighty deeds, is another thing we read, were related primarily to hunting men by tyranny and force. He lorded it over others. And everybody knows what it means when you lord it over someone, right? It means you rule everything. You rule their life. You make it miserable for them. And that's what he did for. He was like maybe a Hitler or a Stalin. And even Stalin, worse than Hitler. You know, millions and millions and millions of people killed just because he didn't like them, you know. He destroyed all that opposed his despotic rule over people. Josephus, everybody knows who Josephus is? Famous Jewish historian. We can learn a lot from him. You know, he wrote about, just right after the time of Christ, maybe 100 years, he wrote a lot of the history back then, and so it really preserved a lot of things for us. He talks about Nimrod and also the writers of the Targums, which were Aramaic translations of the Old Testament. Josephus says that Nimrod persuaded people to ascribe their happiness to Nimrod and not to God. In other words, he tried to be a god to them and said, you're only happy because of me. You know, God has nothing to do with you. The Bible tells us he became a great leader. He taught people to centralize. Remember how we talked about how that he wanted people, all the people there at Babel wanted to stay together and didn't want to be separated like God wanted them to be. You know, God's never intended for us as Christians to stay in one spot. Even after the day of Pentecost, when he spoke in tongues and all that, God didn't intend for everybody to stay right there. And so persecution came on the church, and what happened? It scattered the church. It actually absolutely did. When I went to seminary, suburb of Tulsa, Broken Arrow, little town, nice little town. Almost everybody there is a Christian. You go in the grocery store, you hear people talking about the Lord. You go down to go swim and you hear people talk about the Lord. Everywhere you go, I mean, everybody's a Christian. It's easy. It's an easy place to live for the Lord. Well, what would happen, a lot of people would come out there to go to seminary, and they're all excited. God's called me to the ministry. You know, I'm going to go here and get my education and go out and hit the world, you know, change the world. Well, they would get there, they'd go through school, and then they'd just stay there. Not even good for anything. Mm-hmm. Sit there and hear the same stuff they'd heard for 2 years sitting in school. Didn't do anything. And it frustrated me. I see people do that, and like one of the instructors said one day, he said, you know what? I mean, you had engineers coming out there and going to work at 7-Eleven. You know, people with big jobs because there's no jobs. And he said one day, he said, if you're out here and you've been to school and you're working at 7-Eleven, go help somebody that started a church. Go work in a 7-Eleven in, you know, Billings, Montana.
Los Angeles.
Huh?
Los Angeles. Right?
Yeah, somewhere. Go help somebody. I mean, pastors out there all over the world need help. But they get comfortable. They just want to sit there and just enjoy life and not have any stress, serving the Lord. Huh?
We're the same way.
We are. It's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think that's something we have to guard against in our hearts. So we
Stunt your
don't.
growth?
Huh?
Doesn't that stunt your growth?
I think it does. I really
You never
do.
take a chance. I mean,
And you know what? People aren't getting saved. People aren't being taught the word because you're not out there doing what God called you to do. You're sitting there being comfortable.
that's what you're doing, what God called you to do.
Right. And you're getting fat spiritually. Yeah. So that's something that really always bothered me out there. I saw that so much. And I mean, quick, so I got out of school. I mean, I was gone. And I had friends that were there. They left, failed in the ministry, and they went back. And that's okay. But get beefed up and go again. You know, hit it again. Anyway, the Bible talks about Nimrod being a mighty hunter. And it said it could refer to a hunter of animals or men, either one. And we know that he probably did both. The Hebrew word gebauer is translated mighty. And it means a powerful warrior, a tyrant, a champion, giant, or a strong one. It's also used of the giants that we talked about in Genesis chapter 6 and other wicked men. It could refer to Nimrod as a tyrant or oppressive despot. I don't believe he was a giant. Some people, some Bible scholars believe he might have been, but we know that his dad was Cush and his granddad was Ham. So the giants came from the offspring of the giants having relationships with women, and the giants came out of that. So I don't believe he was a giant. I believe he was just a mighty man. He was powerful. He was probably real influential in the way he spoke. You know, if you watch stories about Hitler and shows about Hitler, he watched film on how to speak and how his actions and motions really moved people. And other than being demon-possessed, which I think Hitler was too, he had a real way of speaking and drawing people in, and I think that's the way Nimrod was too.
Can you read that definition again? You just read of mighty?
Yes.
The word mighty?
Yep, the Hebrew word is Gibor, G-I-B-B-O-W-R, that's the transliteration. And it means mighty, or it means a powerful warrior, tyrant, champion, giant, or strong one. So
It wasn't just physical, it was strong.
right, I think, he was
Strong in everything, not
Right.
just physical.
right, and a great hunter, and I mean, he was just, I think people looked at him kind of like they did Saul, probably. Probably a good-looking guy, and muscly, and, everything he did was awesome. And so, yeah, I think somebody like that. He was powerful and obviously very wicked. Nimrod was so rebellious to God, though. He said he was going to build a tower. First of all, he said, we'll read what Josephus said about him in a minute, but he wanted to build this tower in case God ever flooded the earth again, that they couldn't get flooded out. They'd get on this tower to survive. Well, we talked about that last week. The Bible tells us that the flood was 15 cubits deep, which is about 23 feet deep. Well, if some Bible translations are right, which I believe is just men's ideas, then we're talking 23 feet above Mount Everest. We're talking 23 feet above. Well, a 300-foot tower is not going to go over 32,000 feet, is it?
No.
So I really believe, of course, then the earth didn't have all those mountains and stuff till the time of Peleg. But a 300-foot tower, in his mind, was enough to keep from being flooded. He also said, we'll see in a minute, that he wanted to get even with God for flooding the earth. And so, I mean, he's a pretty evil guy. And we'll read some more tradition about him that I don't think we can really believe, but they talk about it. Josephus wrote in the Antiquities of the Jews, he wrote, now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it were through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God. So that's one thing I want to do, is turn people away from the fear of God. That's something we've lost in our society, is the fear of God.
Yeah.
My stepdad told me in World War II, he was in the South Pacific, he fought with the 6th Division, it was the longest fighting battle group ever at the time. And he said, you watch these movies and they're using the F words all the time in war and all that stuff. He said, we never did that. He said, we didn't know if we're going to be with God the next second, every day. And he said, we didn't talk like that. We didn't act like that. And so I think that's what's happening in our nation, in our world. We've lost the fear of God. The Bible says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Mm-hmm. So we really have lost that. I mean, you see people that they curse God. Openly they curse God. They don't realize what they're doing. It goes on to say, let's see. Seeing he saw no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his power. He also said he would be revenged of God, or take revenge on God, if he should have a mind to drown the world again. For that he would build a tower too high for the waters to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. Now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. In other words, if you love God, you serve God, they called you a coward. And they say, I saw a thing on Good Morning America morning. They have a little ticker along the bottom of the screen. Mm-hmm. And it said, I can't remember exactly how it was worded now. I sent it up to Barb. But it said, there's a steep drop in people calling themselves Christians down in America. Well, I believe that's just the start of persecution that's coming. So many people now are saying, where it used to be, and even Obama, when he first became president, we're not a Christian nation anymore. That was a slap in God's face, I believe. And so now people are openly saying, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian. And that's never happened in this country before. Never happened like it is now. It goes on to say, let's see, where was I at? It says he would all, let's see, now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains, nor being in any degree negligent about the work. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. But the thickness of it was so great that it was so strongly built that thereby its great height seemed upon view to be less than it really was. It was built of burnt brick, cemented together with mortar or bitumen, which was a natural asphalt, made of bitumen, that it might not be liable to admit water. Back then, they normally built brick by just mixing straw with clay and stuff, and they let the sun bake it. Well, here, they baked it in ovens. And a lot of people think the reason they did that was so they could build it faster. They could build it. And I was reading a commentary, and this guy said, isn't it something when we start rebelling from God, how we always try to do things quicker and faster and run faster and do things faster? I heard the other day, they said that the average attention span of an adult now in the United States is like 3 minutes. They said because of all the electronic devices and all that stuff. We're used to a fast world, aren't we? And I think all it does is draws us from God. How many people sit down and read their Bible for an hour? It just doesn't happen much in our society, does it? So, I mean, some of us do, which is great, but it's just getting where the world, that's too much for them. It goes on to say, let's see, when God saw that they acted so madly, he did not resolve to destroy them utterly, since they were not grown wiser by the destruction of the former sinners. In other words, they didn't learn anything through the flood. But he caused a tumult among them by producing in them diverse languages, and causing that through the multitude of those languages they should not be able to understand one another. The place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon, and that's in Iraq, we know that, because of the confusion of that language which they readily understood before. For the Hebrews mean by the word Babel, confusion. So we know that they built the tower there. We know they finished that. It was so wide that it didn't look really that tall. You know, if they would have built it narrow, it would have looked that much taller. But I showed you the drawing last week. We saw how, from the measurements they had, how it was built. We talked about how some people think that Nimrod was a giant. I don't think he was. I think that's pretty plain by Cush being his father and Ham being Cush's father. But we do know that angels fell sometime later on after the flood. Because David, when he took the stone, went out and killed Goliath, and he took 4 stones with him. Not because he was a bad shot, but because Goliath had 4 brothers. And we see in the Bible later on how they're all finally killed off, all those other 4. One of them had a bed that was I think like 16 feet long and 8 feet wide. One of them had 1 eye. I think that's where they get the idea of Cyclops, stuff like that. So that's where the giants came in. They actually, the angels fell again sometime, we don't know when. I'm also convinced that the pyramids were built by the angels, and I've shown you guys here before pictures of giants in the Egyptian pictures, the hieroglyphs and all that.
And that's built by the giants.
What's that?
You said
Built by the angels.
Giants, yeah. So, anyway, I'm convinced of that. When I first got to looking at that, I was showing Barbara a picture of the reason I began to think, because they had some sculptures. There were 4 men seated, these gods, and they had built the Suez Canal over there where the water was getting closer and closer. This is a national treasure, So they went in and they cut this thing up. I mean, it's 40, 50 feet high, these men are seated. And they cut that up into sections and they moved it because they didn't want the water to destroy it. And I got to thinking, what if those sculptures, what if that's a life-size sculpture? Instead of, how sometimes I'll make a sculpture of somebody that'd be 20 feet tall. What if that was a life-size sculpture? So I just looked up on Google one day, looking up giants and hieroglyphics and all that, and I'll be darned if I didn't find a bunch of them. And I found the one Egyptologist that said they told him when he went over there, said if you talk any, he was a Christian, he said if you say anything about giants here, we'll shun you, we won't tell you anything, we'll run you out of Egypt. So why would they be threatened by that? I don't know, it's interesting to me. Go to Genesis chapter 11. And I might have been there, verse 5, let's start there. This is what happened when they got the tower, were building it and stuff. And it says, but the Lord came down to look at the city and the tower the people were building. Look, he said, the people are united and they all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages then they won't be able to understand each other. In that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world, and they stopped building the city. That is why the city was called Babel, because that is where the Lord confused the people with different languages. In this way, he scattered them. I was able to find all over. In this way, he scattered them. I was able to find all over the world. So, did God really have to make Chinese, though? I mean, some of those languages are crazy, aren't they? Of course, they probably think ours are too. They say English is one of the hardest languages to learn if you don't know it. But it's interesting to me how God did that. He said because they didn't learn, Josephus said, because they didn't learn from what happened in the flood, God wasn't going to destroy them utterly, but he just confused their languages. We know that happened. But you know what? They wanted to centralize. They wanted to be powerful as one. What are we doing in this country now? There's actually computer programs you can speak into, and it'll translate your language into another language. You can actually take your typed word and put it into Google Translator. There's another 2 or 3 things you put in there, and it'll give you the spelling and all that in a different language. It's not always perfect, but it gets the point across. So what we're doing is we're overcoming what God did, which I think is a sign of where we're at. I've told you several times about different scientists coming in saying that if they do this, they can make us live forever. I mean, that's what a lot of scientists want to do, is make us live forever. One guy wants to do the head transplant. So every time your body gets old, you just put your head on a different body. He said that the actual surgery takes 30 minutes. Can you believe that?
No, thank you.
They actually took, yeah. They actually did it on a monkey in the early 60s. Yeah, I'll be back a little bit.
I look a little different than now. I'm going to go down to the Arby's and do head.
But they actually did that in the early 60s with a monkey, and it was successful. And they kept that, it was in Cleveland, that's where they did it. They kept it secret for a long time.
Yeah.
But if you go on like History Channel, they have a show, they talk about it, and they show pictures of the monkey and show them actually doing surgery. The way they put the nerve endings together, which I thought was really, and they'll, like with spinal cords that are severed, they're going to be able to cure that. I bet within 10 years they'll be curing severed spinal cords. And what they do on a brain like that, they use antifreeze to glue the nerve endings together. I thought that was like a glycol. And I thought that was really weird. And it just takes a little bit for it to set up, and it hooks those together. It's just crazy. And like I say, this guy in Italy, he wants to do one, but he knows it's going to cause a lot of uproar and all that, so he's trying to find a place he can do it in the world, so he won't, and he'll do it. I mean, you think about it, all this cloning and all that. First, they didn't want people to do that, but they did it. I mean, these crazy scientists will do whatever.
Well, then we'll have a whole bunch of people walking around with Alzheimer's, because they say if you live long enough, everybody will get Alzheimer's. So then there'll be all these new bodies with Alzheimer's. How wonderful that would be.
Who's going to make the
Everybody will be
decision?
forgetting.
Now, who will make the decision?
Who am I married to now?
Still, in order for me, in order for a head transplant, somebody's got to die.
Right.
Yes, so where are they gonna go?
Somebody's gonna lose out.
Young bodies.
Yeah.
Right, that's.
Well, they had a thing on the other day they were talking about it was in, what's the big prison out off in San Francisco? Alcatraz. They had, every time they'd execute somebody, they would, and I hate to say this, but they would transplant the testicles on the older people, older guys in the prison to see what happened. And they learned to use testosterone through that. And, but they said the problem was they didn't have enough people being executed for all the people that wanted the surgery. So, anyway.
Yeah, you talk about antifreeze, that's interesting. If you drink it, it'll kill you.
Right.
But you use it to heal you up
Crazy, isn't it?
internally. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, in Turkey now, you can get out of prison, like if you will give the government one of your kidneys, or they cut time off of your prison sentence.
Wow.
Yeah, because they harvest them. Turkey's a big harvester of parts from live people, not cadavers, that the government sells because the Turkish government is very poor.
Wow.
Yeah, and same as the women can get out earlier for forming, by being prostitutes. And it's,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Wow.
so, I mean, if we can transplant heads, what happened is people will die for their bodies.
Right. Well, in the Philippines, places like that, people are selling one kidney.
Yeah.
They make $20,000. Those guys in their whole lifetime may never see $10,000. That's just evil.
Yeah.
And it's just, all this stuff, trying to live I don't want to live forever on this thing. I really don't.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and get the new body.
Absolutely. And we'll be back here anyway. We're going to live here with him and rule this earth.
Yeah.
Like that.
I read
today, it's acceptable. Oh yeah, we can put a new head on a new body, no problem. And they're born into homosexuality, no problem today. We didn't even have HBO with our kids.
Yeah.
You know, and then it just makes it more acceptable. So, like Pastor you said, I said last week about the 20 people on stage,
Yeah.
this generation only one is Christian.
Yeah.
Scary stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, they're listening to this stuff like it's just no problem, it's okay.
Yeah. We live in a wicked world. And you know, we try to do better for our children and all that stuff, and I think we've done a disservice a lot of times. I mean, not maybe us, but I mean, as a world as a whole, I think we've done a disservice. We make them think that they deserve everything good and everything easy. And if you look back at, like, you know, they called the people in World War II the greatest generation. I remember my mom talking about, she was too young, you know, my dad was too, but they would go and do metal drives, scrap metal drives. I mean, the whole country was involved. No matter, even in little parts, they all had ration stamps, they only have so many tires a year, so many shoes a year. And nowadays, if you did that, people would revolt. They just wouldn't know how to deal with it. Well, the Bible tells us that God came down. I mean, he physically came down to see what was going on. The word when it says to come down is yarod in the Hebrew, and it means to descend to a lower region. He actually came out of heaven, came down, and to see what they were doing. How many times then God comes down and looks at our earth and sees what's going on? You ever think he came down and checked out Madeline Murray O'Hare to see what she was doing? She got prayer taken out of the schools. That was part of her downfall. It's one of the reasons we're here now. You think maybe he's come down to see what ISIS is doing?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I really believe that God's coming down and check all this out and see, you know, and knowing what to do. What's that?
Is it time yet? Is it?
I think it's getting very close.
He could be the guy on the corner.
We'll see later too. What's that?
He could be the guy on the corner with that little sign that says,
That's right.
World's
Absolutely
coming
right.
in.
Then you got the angels on where too.
Yep. And we'll see a little bit later on how God came and hung with Abraham one day. Man, I think that's awesome. How it's like Jesus just come and hang with you. Man, I think that's cool. I'm like, come on. You know, you women, we go, well, give me 3 days to clean the house.
Yeah.
And like I said, all these guys said, oh, just scoot it out of the way. That's what we do. So anyway.
Dump it on the floor.
Me and Jesus, we're going down to Denny's to get some coffee and pancakes. You clean the house, we won't be here after
He can
that.
get the ticket.
Yeah, he may just say, let's go to heaven now.
Hey, that'd be good with me. Well, in Luke 17, Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, and as it was in the days of Lot, that's what the days of his return would be like. We know it was very wicked, very wicked. And even God destroying the whole earth except for Noah and his family, it got wicked within 2 generations. We were right back to where we were before. Isn't that amazing? I mean, the Bible talks about how people are continually evil, even from their birth, they're evil. Talked about persecutions. I've already gotten ahead of myself here. Anyway, about this time comes along another major player in the Bible. His name is Terah. Anybody know who Terah was? He's the father of Abram. And he wasn't Abraham, he was Abram. Remember, you know what the name Abram means? It means high father or esteemed father. Well, we know that Terah, he lived in a city called U-R, of the Chaldees, or Chaldeans, they call it. That was actually just above what is current day Syria, just a little ways up into Turkey is where that was at. It was part of Assyria at the time, in Chaldee. Well, anyway, Terah had 3 children, 3 sons. He had Abram, he had Nahor, and he had Haran. Well, Haran died young. Haran was the father of Lot. So he was a brother to Abram, so we know Lot was the nephew of Abram. But Haran also had Milcah and Iscah, 2 daughters. Well, Milcah married Nahor, so he married his niece. Some scholars say that was a different Milcah from a different Haran. I don't think it is. I think the reason the Bible tells us here that's the way it was because that's the way it was. I don't think it was somebody else. And how many Harans are going to have Milcahs that are in your life that you're going to marry? So apparently he married his niece, which was, I guess, acceptable back then. But Terah, finally, God told Abram, he told him to, well, let's just go and read the scriptures. Yes?
Where are you at?
I am trying to find a seat.
29.
Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Let's go there. Yeah, jump over to that. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. It says, Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, Ur of the Chaldees, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. How have all the families of the earth been blessed? Through Abraham.
Jesus.
Jesus, that's right.
Yeah.
Jesus. So we've all been blessed because of that.
So how long after the Tower of Babel was it?
It was a little while after, and we don't know exactly for sure.
Generations, right?
Well, not generations, maybe 1.5, maybe 2. I mean, Nimrod is still around. They think that Nimrod and Abram actually met. Yeah, they think they actually met. But they think that Abram was born while Nimrod was ruling these countries. And I'll show you that in a minute. Stephen, in the book of Acts, in chapter 7, verse 2, he said, "Brothers and fathers, listen to me. The God who reveals his glory appeared to our ancestor Abram in Mesopotamia. This happened before Abraham lived in Haran." Well, Abraham was born in the Ur of the Chaldees city. And then later, he and his family moved to Haran, which was also the name of his brother, Haran. Well, at some point, Terah took Abraham and Sarai, who was before Sarah, but God changed her name too, took Abraham and Sarai, or Abram and Sarai, and he also took Lot, and they moved to Haran. So they were living there. Nahor with Milcah stayed in Ur. Well, later we see how they ended up going down. Like I say, the brother Haran, that was Lot's dad, he died young. So Lot was kind of left to fend for himself and live with Abraham. And you see through the Bible how there was not such a good relationship with them, and we'll see that as we go. You know, we look at Hebrews 11, we call it Heroes of Faith chapter, and we tell this every Tuesday night in Solar Recovery Newcomers, that we see these people that God says were men of faith and women of faith. But when you read, I remember reading that one time, then I started reading all the way through the Bible. The very first time I thought, wait a minute, this person's really messed up, and I thought they're a man of faith or a woman of faith. Well, you know what? God changed them to that. It just shows that they had problems just like we do. Thank God that God can work in all our lives. Joshua 24:2, it says, "And Joshua said unto all the people, Thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel, your fathers dwelt of old time beyond the river." You know, that's the Tigris and Euphrates. "Even Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods." So we know that starting out that Terah and Nahor, those guys, they didn't serve the same God of Abram. But we find out later that they switched. We believe they converted to the God of Abram and served him. Genesis 12:1-3. Did I read that all ago? Yeah, I just did. I just read that. I'm kind of getting off my notes here a little bit. Genesis 12:4-9 says, "So Abram left as the Lord God had told him, and Lot went with him." This is when he's leaving Haran and headed down to Canaan, which is our modern-day Israel. Abram was 75 years old at that time. Well, we find out, I think if you go to Genesis 17, God tells him that he's 99 years old at that time. So it's been 24 years later. We'll get into that a little later. But God says, at this point, I want you to start serving me with your whole heart. So apparently he was, for these 24 years, he really wasn't serving God with his whole heart. And then that's when God told him, "Son, I'm going to give you a child. I'm going to bless you with a child," and all that stuff. And then when he was, 120, whatever, he had the son. And Sarah was, 100, something like that. I forget that. I'm not exactly on the dates. I'll figure all that later when we teach it. But there was a time that God said, "Okay, it's time for you to get serious with me." And I don't know about you guys, but there was a time in my life that God said, "Hey, it's time to get serious." And I was 18. A friend of mine, I got saved when I was 13, and I tried to live a Christian life, what I thought was a Christian life, and a life that was worthy of being saved, and man, I tried. Of course, none of my friends were living like that. And after about a year, matter of fact, I remember my bedroom one day, I was talking to my best buddy, he was over hanging out, and I was trying to tell him about the Lord, and what Jesus had done to me, and I was trying to remember something in the Bible. I walked in the mom's room, and she was sewing or doing something she did, and I asked her about it, and she says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to tell Kevin about the Lord." She said, "You don't need to do that. It's not your place to tell people about Jesus." And my mother. So I'm like, okay, But after about a year, I fell away, and I never did a lot of bad things, but I wasn't serving the Lord. And then there was a friend of mine, I've shared this before, but he was a drug dealer in this little town I had moved to, worked for the phone company, and he took pictures of the ball games. He was a senior in high school. He worked for the local newspaper, and he took pictures of the ball game. Well, I had friends playing football. I'd go down the sidelines with him and take pictures of the plays. And I'd give my friends pictures. We were always going to get together and smoke some pot or do something like that. And it just never worked out. Well, one night, my mom, all I wanted to do was get high. And I never really smoked a lot of pot. But my mom and dad came over. Oh, I can't do that with them here. Well, then they left, and here came another buddy that didn't do any of that, so I just wish he'd leave. And then here came this friend of mine, the biggest drug dealer in town, and all this stuff, and man, he was bouncing off the walls. I'm like, what's wrong with you? He goes, I got saved! I'm like, you go, what? I got saved! I was like, Jesus? He said, yeah! And I mean, that really freaked me out. He says, you need to try Jesus! And I'm like, I've tried that before. He says, no, you need to try again. And you know what? The Holy Spirit convicted my heart. And God, it was time God said, look, you got to get right now. And I prayed with him, dumped all that crap down the toilet, alcohol I had down the toilet. He was like bouncing off the walls, and I'm thinking, man, I hope this is the right thing to do. Old.
How old are you?
Oh, I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah, he was probably 18, 17, 18. But,
Wow, that's awesome, the way God ordered that night. I mean, because
It
if
worked
your
out.
parents hadn't been there,
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if any one of those little things hadn't have been there.
yeah.
Right.
And you know, I made the commitment that night. I said, Lord, I said, I don't care if I don't ever feel good about serving you. I'm going to make a commitment tonight that I'll serve you the rest of my life. And you know, for about 2
I wonder
weeks,
if you ever heard that before, that is so weird, Jay.
it
I don't
probably
ever
is.
feel
It's me.
good about serving
Barbara tells
you.
me I'm weird all the time, so. But I didn't feel good about it. But one day I was just praising, and I was in my car, and I think I told you this before, but I was turning, and I'll tell you something else awesome about this, but I was turning through an intersection, my little American Motors Pacer, it was like an upside down fishbowl, and I was worshiping the Lord, and the Lord baptized me with the Holy Spirit, and that's why I was reading speaking in tongues and all that. Changed my life, completely changed my life. People that know me know it changed my life. Well, the Baptists have just come out. Barbara's reading me a story, was it last night, about the Baptists. You know, they used to with their International Mission Board, IMB, the mission board, they wouldn't take people who said they had spoken in tongues and all that. What?
Don't hang on to that.
Okay, yeah, squeaky, I'm sorry. Anyway, but they changed their minds. They came out the other day and said they will consider people. Because what's happening in Africa, this good friend of mine's truck driver comes through, so I've been a Christian for years. His wife works for a Baptist church. She's a secretary up in Missouri, a big Baptist church. She said people in the mission field are coming back speaking in tongues, all Baptists. And God is moving among the Baptists, baptizing the Holy Spirit, speaking in
Did this
tongues.
change recently?
Just today,
This
yesterday.
happened yesterday.
No kidding.
Yeah. Isn't that
I
great?
wonder if everybody on our church board has heard about
I've
that.
seen that. But you know, that's been Pastor David's attitude toward it.
Yeah.
And that's
All that
the reason
stuff
I
that
do. I
we
can
did
come
a
to
year or two
church.
ago, and now it's
Especially on mission field,
Right.
safe and strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think about it, it's like I've said,
a couple of people we gotta ask.
what's the difference over there than here? Is there not as much sin here as there is in the mission
We're so
field?
callous.
We put the lipstick on the pig over here. That's all we do, is the difference.
Just changing their curriculum at their Bible college now.
They could
Because
be.
you know, some people never were taught that,
Yeah.
and now they'll be taught that, I guess.
I think it's fantastic.
Cool.
You know, and you don't have to speak in tongues to go to heaven. You don't. But let me tell you, with the things that are coming, the Bible says that Jesus said to receive power.
Yeah.
Dunamis power, like dynamite power, after the Holy Spirit comes upon you. I think with what's coming in this earth, we need to be baptized with the Spirit. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to share that, and it changed my life. It really did. So let's go. Let's see.
I was reading it to him last night, and he's looking at me. I said, this is your friend, he posted on Facebook.
I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyway, it goes on in that part of Genesis and tells us about how Abraham kept moving east and south. And in verse 8, what chapter am I in here?
Chapter 12.
Okay, I think I'm still, yeah, chapter 12. No, yeah, I think it is, 12. Verse 8, it says he moved on the, well, let's back up. I want to show you something there too. Yeah, go to verse 6. Chapter 12, verse 6. It says, they arrived in Canaan, and Abram traveled through the land to the oak tree belonging to Morah at Shechem. That was some kind of, like a waypoint or something. And it says, at the time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I'm going to give this land to your descendants. So what did he do? It says he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Now go on to verse 8. It says he moved on to the hills east of Bethel, and he put up his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. He also built an altar to the Lord there and worshiped the Lord. Abram kept moving toward the Negev, or kept moving south. I said once before here, I think we need to build altars to the Lord. Every time God does something amazing in our life, we need to build an altar. And I'm not talking about physically going out and getting stoned. You can do that. But do something so you know what God's done in your life. Every time I lead somebody to the Lord, I tell them, I first ask them, you got a Bible? If they don't, I give them a Bible. And most of the time they do, but I'll say, you need to write in the front of that Bible, I got saved this date, this time, and that way, because I said, every time the devil's going to come back at you and say, oh, that didn't happen, you didn't get saved. That's just, the Bible says we need to not be ignorant of his devices. That's one of his devices. So if we write that down, every time the devil tries to lie to us, we can go say, look, Satan.
It's called journaling.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. But we should do that. We should build altars to the Lord. I mean, God's done so many amazing things for me. I think about my son when he was born. They came in, I was setting the time, they had me timing birth pains and all that. I found that was just keeping me busy. I realized that later. I didn't know at the time. I thought it was something important. But all of a sudden they came in and they rushed me out of the room, and the nurses were running around. I'm like, what's going on? I mean, I knew something was wrong. And they wouldn't tell me. And I was mad. And they finally came in and said, well, your wife's blood pressure's gone crazy. And the baby's in distress. The cord's around his neck, he's breached, and he's in distress. And we've got to get him out. Well, they rushed her by right into surgery. Well, about 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, they brought my baby out, my boy, and his face was blue. And they rushed him on down to the incubator and all that stuff. But while that was going on, there was a little bathroom right by the surgery room. I mean, just a little sink and a toilet. But I went in that place and I got on my knees. And when I did, I don't even know how to describe it, but it felt like I was lifted up to the feet of God. I mean, it's like I was right at his feet. And I just prayed and I said, Lord, save my son, save my baby. And came out, like I say, he was blue, but God saved his life. And that's a time to build an altar. Amen. It's time to build an altar. Amen. So let's talk about Nimrod and the way they put it in here. This is actually from Wikipedia. The evil Nimrod versus the righteous Abram. There's a lot of things that are a bunch of baloney. People made up all these stories. I told you about what they call the pseudepigrapha, which are all these, they look like biblical books. I mean, they sound scriptural, all this. Most of them written between 100 and 200 years after Christ. And man, if you didn't know, you'd think, oh, this is scriptural. And I told you about the one where the guy was so holy that he couldn't even wear clothes. He almost couldn't wear clothes because he was so holy it would defile his body. And then when he went to heaven, they couldn't wear even robes up there because it would defile their bodies. Well, then they prayed the rosary like 10 times a day. Well, that tells you right there where the story came from, but it's a Catholic story. It's not scripture. So what you do in the pseudepigrapha, these guys that determined what was going to be in the Bible and what wasn't years ago, took all that and they had to judge according to what they had, what is scriptural, what's not. Well, now when we read something, we have to judge it by the Word of God. Any book you read. I mean, there's a lot of books out there. You go to the Bible bookstore, there are a lot of books about the Bible. Which ones are true, which ones aren't. I knew a lady in Houston, one of my best buddies used to feed the homeless down, a Harvard degree and all this stuff, and he's going to be with the Lord now, but one of his ex-wives, she was a counselor that dealt a lot with abuse issues and all that, sexual abuse and all that. She was a weirdo. Let me tell you, you go to her house, all her windows were shut, it was dark in there, she was afraid of the light, and all of a sudden she wrote this big book that just went big in the Christian world, and I'm thinking, oh my word. And matter of fact, a lady I met in Houston, I worked with her husband at the refinery. This lady had her convinced, even though nothing had ever happened, she had her convinced that her mom and dad had molested her when she was little because she couldn't remember anything about it. Well, if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. I mean, seriously, she wouldn't even let them see her kids, their grandkids. It was. So be really careful what you read. The Bible says there's many voices in the world, but they're not all God. So anyway, real quickly about Abraham and Nimrod, they do believe that the Jews talk about that they actually had a meeting, but it was just they spoke to each other, and I don't know what happened there. But there's a lot of tradition that the Quran talks about other things. One thing says that Nimrod actually was so mad at God that he flew up on a bunch of doves and went to heaven and tried to overcome God. That's not true. We know that. But it also talks about like them having a battle and all this stuff, and that stuff didn't happen. But it is very possible they met each other because they were the same age, same time. Nimrod obviously older than Abram. And they say that one of the stories, Nimrod captured Abram. He was going to burn him at the stake, and he wanted to be the world's biggest bonfire ever. So they collected wood for 4 years to have the world's biggest bonfire. And they got Abraham up there, and they started to burn it, and he just walked away. Didn't burn it. Well, that probably didn't happen. So anyway, just be careful what you read. There's all kinds of voices. Anybody have any questions on Nimrod or Abram? You know, with Abram, everything changed. And even our lives today are changed because of Abram. He's the father of our faith. And we'll start talking more about him now and what he went through. And you know what? He was pretty rotten sometimes.
Got a song in there.
We'll see next week how he told his wife, said, act like you're my cousin because they'll kill me because you're so beautiful. I mean, she's a 75-year-old woman and beautiful. People would be like, wow. And would you do that? Would you say, hey, tell people tell them you're my wife, and then Pharaoh apparently married her?
No.
I mean, come on. And these guys serve God. So
And he did it again.
yeah. So anyway, pretty messed up.